We now have a night edition here of the BAMA Elite Podcast, Touchdown Alabama Magazine, with the three baddest men in the building right here. We got Justin Smith, the lead scouting and recruiting analyst for TDA, Patrick Dowd, breaking news reporter for Touchdown Alabama Magazine. I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith, and as always, people, got to remind you, if you're not checking us out here, the BAMA Elite, although we encourage you to check us out here because we got that flavor for you, but in case you can't get to us, we want you to check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for the best coverage of college football in the South. So if you can't catch the Bama Elite with Justin, Pat, and myself, got to check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for the best coverage in the South. But starting this thing off, Pat, some adversity over the weekend. Bama had a tough task there, was able to cover the spread, I believe, but it was not easy.
Yeah, no, it wasn't easy at times, but I think there actually were a lot of areas where Alabama grew up, and we'll get into it. I think there was actually more areas than not where Alabama really grew up along its offense and defense.
Justin, same to you, man. How you feeling? You got a chance to watch a tough matchup there between Bama and Arkansas. We knew the Hogs would come in spirited, but what did you think about it, Justin?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot to take away from this game. I kind of felt like we may not be heading into a game that was going to go four quarters at the beginning in the earlier part of the game. Alabama jumped out to a 28-point lead. You thought they were going to run away with it for a while until Bryce Young went down with that injury. I know we'll get down and talk about that a little bit later in the show. But yeah, a lot to talk about from this matchup.
Absolutely, a lot to talk about. So let's get into that, Justin. Let's get into that right there. So, Alabama's up 28-0 there in the first half. It looks like a runaway. Alabama's offense putting up points. Its defense was stifling KJ Jefferson and the Razorback offense. And then in the second quarter, a play happens where Bryce Young breaks out of the pocket. He's being chased by his former teammate, former five-star Drew Sanders. Sanders makes the play. Bryce Young falls awkwardly on his shoulder. The very next play, he tries to make a throw. There's a lot of frustration in his face. He looks at Coach Saban. He points directly at his shoulder. He comes off the field, obviously bothered by it. He throws his helmet to the ground in absolute pain and absolute anguish. He goes into the medical tent. A lot of fans are like, oh my gosh, it's Bryce Young. We've never seen this before. He's hurt, shades of Tua Tagovailoa, so to speak. And then he's in that tent for a long time. He ends up running into the locker room for the half. Jalen Milroe goes out there. Thankfully, it's only just a sprained AC joint in the shoulder, according to Coach Saban. Bryce could be back here, more than likely would be back here for the Texas A&M game, depending on how he looks this upcoming week in practice. But starting off with you, Justin, it was a little scary there when Bryce went down. We're going to get to Jalen Milroe in a minute because he had some big moments in the game. But the initial moment of Bryce going down, it looked really scary there for the Alabama nation.
Yeah, I definitely can see why they would feel that way. Bryce Young showing some emotion in the game, which was the way that CBS showed it. It went directly to the point where he threw his helmet down. And look, at first glance, my first impression was he was frustrated with the fact that Alabama's wide receivers are dropping the football so much because they dropped several passes earlier in that game. So that was my initial thought until they went back and said that he was hurting, pointing towards his shoulder, showing that he had a shoulder injury. So I definitely see why Alabama fans were on high alert when he went into the tent and everything. So yeah, it was really interesting watching that whole thing play out. I know he tried, like I said, to make that throw and showed the throw it wasn't a bad throw either when he threw it with his injured shoulder there. So yeah, I think that was my first impression. I thought he was frustrated at their wide receivers until we ultimately found out that he was hurting, which because we don't see Bryce Young show any type of emotion as far as being up and down, no matter at any point in the game. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I thought one of the few criticisms you could really point out in Bryce Young as an NFL, particularly as an NFL draft prospect, is how is he going to hold up? Because Bryce is a pretty slim guy. So how he's going to hold up when 260-pound Drew Sanders lands on him. And we saw that, thankfully it was just an AC sprain, and this is something that Alabama and Bryce Young have dealt with before, which is also encouraging, but it just poses the question, just how many hits can he take, especially year 2 playing as a full-time starter, just how much can he really take in terms of getting hit and brought to the ground. So it was a scary realization for Alabama fans of what life after Bryce Young would look like, but it looks like that he's going to be back out there on the field sooner than not.
And that was a good thing hearing Coach Saban being able to talk about giving us that quick update there on Bryce where the shoulder is concerned. So once again, he's going to have Bryce listed as day-to-day, as Saban always does. They'll go through practice this week and see how Young looks out there on the practice field. But guys, getting in the Jalen Milroe, his moment came over the weekend. Like fans have been waiting for, what can Milroe do? Came out of high school, Tompkins High School, Katy, Texas, 4-star guy, 2021 class. Justin, you scouted this young man tremendously. We always knew what he was in terms of an athlete and a weight room warrior, so to speak. But what would he be when he's put out there in the fire in this type of a situation? And to me, Pat, I thought he looked poised. I thought he had some real brilliant moments out there. One in particular, I know he started the game with the rushing touchdown, to give Alabama the 28-0 lead. And then he had the touchdown pass off the screen to JoJo Earl, who did play. But you're up, 28-23. Arkansas's cut to the lead. Their fans are back into it. Their offense has found some life. Their defense was generating some stops. The crowd that got back into it. And then Jalen Milroe doing what only Jalen Milroe does. 3rd and 15. He eludes Bumper Pool, goes 77 yards down the field, sets up a Jace McClellan touchdown to push Alabama's lead back out 35-23. A huge play that only Jalen Milroe could make. And then he started off, and then he would go with a few more strong plays after that. So, Pat, to you, I thought Milroe played with poise. I thought he played with confidence. I thought he provided some big moments that Alabama needed, doing the thing that he does the most, which is using that athleticism.
I mean, absolutely. We know that, he still has a little ways to go in terms of the passing, but when it came down to his strengths, I mean, he showed it off on that 3rd and 15 with that 77-yard run. I mean, I knew Jalen Milroe was fast. I didn't know he had that kind of burner speed, just running past 77 yards, nearly scoring as well. So, I think they definitely could have gone way worse, especially having your backup quarterback going into a hostile environment. But yeah, I agree with you, Stephen. I think he, for the most part, he was really poised and took care of the football, which was really the most important thing, because Alabama caught a lot of bad breaks in terms of the onside kicks, the bad snap. They spotted Arkansas more points than they probably actually deserved. But it was just good, just good in and of itself of Jalen Milroe not to hand them any more free shots to the end zone.
Yeah, Milroe definitely looked good. Similar to you, Patty. I scouted him, and going back to him at Tompkins High School in Texas, Katy, Texas, he always seemed to just want to use his feet to extend plays, to throw the football. Even going back to talking to his head coach at Tompkins High School, he described him as a quarterback who wants to extend the play with his feet and make plays with his arm down the field after he extended the play. So I wasn't aware how fast he was as far as being that explosive, because with the type of speed that he displayed, he can create some separation in the open field. So he was very, very explosive as a runner, and I think that is going to help him as he continues to grow as a quarterback. I think he's still developing. I think his best football is in front of him from a quarterback perspective. So I'm excited to see what he can do in Tuscaloosa in the future. I think the thing that most young quarterbacks have to go through is being consistently accurate. I think that's something that he definitely has to work on. He showed flashes of, I think he hit Isaiah. I don't know if it was Isaiah Bond or another wide receiver on like a comeback hitch route. That was a good pass, but then he tried to hit like Jermaine Burton on like a slant. It was like low to the ground. A couple of the passes were like low, a little bit low, a little high. I think he has to work on consistently accurate. I think, Pat, you talked about this a little bit before we got started here. I think if Alabama was to incorporate a game plan that fits his skill set a little better, I think he will have a little bit more success. They seem to be a little bit more conservative in this matchup, in the play calling when he got on the field. I think that more so had to do with the fact that Alabama had a pretty decent lead when he got on the field, if things were a bit tighter, they may have been forced to open their playbook a little bit more. But if they redesign their game plan to fit a faster, explosive quarterback like Jalen Milroe, who was still growing as a passer, I think he would have had a little bit more success in the air. But I think the future is bright for Jalen Milroe. And if he can figure things out as a passer, he's going to be an exciting, dynamic, highlight type of quarterback to watch.
I'll say this. I mean, if you're an Alabama fan, and if I were to tell you, you would enter this game, you're up 28-0. You would lose the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Jalen Milroe would have to come in. Your league gets cut 28-23. You have 10 penalties. A lot of things went wrong. You didn't see the onside kick when it came, and that happened. You get a botched punt on your end. And despite all of these things, you still come away with a 49-26 win. A lot of Alabama fans are going, you know what? Give me the money. I will take it. I will take that to the bank. And that's exactly what happened. But Justin, getting into one of the groups that really grew up, I mean, the offensive line grew up. And people have been talking about all season long about this offensive line. When will Coach Eric Wolford style take root? When will this offensive line grow up and be able to run the football and put a hat on a hat and drive guys off the football? Well, it happened. Seth McLaughlin got the start over Darian Dalcourt. Dalcourt dealing with some back spasms there, according to a close source that spoke to me, prior to the game starting. So, McLaughlin got the start. We all know how good he is as a run blocking center. And oh my goodness, Bama's offensive line blocked for over 300 yards rushing. Jahmyr Gibbs had an insane day. We'll get to him in a minute. But Justin, seeing this offensive line under Coach Wolford grow up in a big matchup where Arkansas had dudes. You talk about Jordan Dominic, Drew Sanders, Bumper Pool, big number 50, Gregory. Arkansas had dudes, but yeah, Bama's offensive line grew up to the challenge. How impressed were you with them?
I was thoroughly impressed with Alabama's offensive line. Going up against, I think Arkansas had the best pass rushing defensive front heading into that matchup, led by former Alabama linebacker Drew Sanders. So I really like what Alabama did from the running perspective, and it just shows you that Jahmyr Gibbs, all he needs is a lane. If he has a lane and has open field, he's going to explode through it like he got shot out of a shotgun, just how explosive he is with the football in his hands, able to make some moves in the open field as well. And I think this was I know we'll talk about him a little bit later, but I do feel this was his best game as far as running downhill. Had some pretty successful interior runs, but we are going to talk about Gibbs a little bit later in the show. But switching our attention back to Alabama's offensive line, seemed to have great communication with Bryce Young. He was making a lot of pre-snap reads. I really like the fact that they held up good against Arkansas's pass rush. Great communication. I think it was the Isaiah Bond deep pass where I think Arkansas sent the house. I think Arkansas sent everybody, and no one got any pressure. Yeah, no one got any pressure on Bryce Young. He was able to throw an accurate pass to Isaiah Bond, who got behind Arkansas's defense pretty good during that particular play. And I know we're going to talk about those freshman wide receivers a little bit later. So, yeah, I was really impressed with Alabama's offensive line. Definitely have shown some continued growth. Yeah, Seth McLaughlin, you saw several plays that he made that helped just basically catapult the running backs into the open field. So, yeah, I was impressed with Alabama's offensive line as a whole.
Yeah, and guys, we've been sounding like broken records for weeks saying, when will they figure out the offensive line? What if they figure out the offensive line? How dangerous could this running back room be? It could be 206 yards and 2 touchdowns that are Jahmyr Gibbs dangerous. And it could be only allowing 1 sack against Arkansas that has had the nation's leading individual sack leader in Drew Sanders. So, and Justin, just the play that you brought up, I think it was the Isaiah Bond pass. The Arkansas sent 5, and no one came close to Bryce Young. And that was one of the plays where I was like, oh wait, they might have something here. And look, Seth McLaughlin, he's an absolute dog in the middle, because I think it was whichever one Jahmyr Gibbs took up the middle, he had a massive hole.
He did. I think, Pat, that was the 73-yarder, because Bumper Pool thinks he's got Gibbs, and just Seth McLaughlin comes downhill, mashes Bumper Pool completely out of the way, and Gibbs runs off him 73 yards and gone.
Yeah, no, it was really perfect timing because Bumper Pool came right down the line of scrimmage and Seth came right off and just washed him away. And it was once Jahmyr Gibbs, all we've been saying is he just needs a crease. Well, he got about 10 yards worth of space on both sides of him, and he absolutely took off twice for 70-yard gains. This offensive line, if they can keep this consistency, and look, they're still rotating guys in, whether it's Javion Cohen or Tyler Booker in the game. Either way, they performed whoever was in the game. And if once they figure out a solid group, or maybe, you know what, maybe they just keep rotating all year. It seems to be, if they keep getting results like Arkansas and it works for them, why not?
So now we look at the human cheat code, Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's been used all season as more of a wide receiver. Saturday, we saw him as a running back and as an explosive, as a downhill one cut, speed, vision, explosiveness, contact balance, bouncing off guys. We saw him as a running back. The first 100-yard rusher for Alabama this season, the first 200-yard rusher for Alabama this season. The dude averaged 11.4 yards per carry. CBS had a graphic there. I think he's 11th all-time in school history now for rushing yards in a single game. They had him up there with Sean Alexander and Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson and Najee Harris, Derek Key, all the Bama greats. So Jahmyr Gibbs is right up there, with those guys. So what a way to put yourself up there with the Bama greats for a single game than to do it against Arkansas, who came in with that style of defense, Justin.
Yeah, we good now. Yeah, Alabama's run game definitely showed some great signs of developing and getting better, specifically as an interior run game. I think that's an area where we haven't seen Alabama do good throughout this season, but specifically Jahmyr Gibbs has had limited success running the football in the interior, which is why I feel that they probably got him the football more so in the pass game, just give him the football in space as they continue to try to figure things out up front. But it looks as if they have figured it out. It looks as if the light at the end of the tunnel is starting to show when it comes to Alabama's offensive line. I think Jahmyr Gibbs benefited off of that, and he's really explosive, great top end speed. Once he gets into the open field, once he gets a couple of steps ahead of any defender, they're not even going to catch up with him. I'm not sure if you guys remember Drew Sanders was trying to catch up with him on one play. He basically gave up mid-play because when a guy like that looks as if he's continuing to accelerate, great acceleration in the open field. So, yeah, I like what I've seen out of Jahmyr Gibbs being a threat. No, he's going to continue to be a threat out of the backfield and as a running back. So I think he has put it together, I think, as a running back for Alabama. If they give him the lane and the opportunity to be dynamic, I think he can have some really good performances moving forward in this season as he continues to try to boost his draft stock in the future.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there too, Justin. Just giving him the opportunity to be dynamic, whether it's out of the backfield or taking handoffs. And I think it's just really unique how they have used in the past 2 weeks. Because when we look a week ago against Vanderbilt, I don't think he had a touch until like late in the second quarter, but now he's leading the way with 18 carries. So whatever Bill O'Brien figured out between now and then, I think they have something now with Gibbs, or maybe it's just a situation where they're going to ride the hot hand because, like we've said, this backfield has so much talent in it, and if they can get this kind of production out of anybody, or whether it's the three of them or two of them or Gibbs or just McClellan or maybe just Rodo Williams, I think they've really tapped into a real strength of their team.
Whether it was Saban yelling on the sideline, guys, or whether it was Bill O'Brien calling these run plays out, the Alabama fan base pretty happy there to see running the football there from Alabama's offensive line and the backs. But now we look at the group that still trying to find itself, and that's the wide receiver unit. And, Justin, you brought this up, a lot of dropped balls. Trayshawn Holden had a couple of drops in there. Ja'Cory Brooks had 2 balls to hit him dead in his hands. He had a couple of drops after having the big game against Vanderbilt in the previous matchup. Cameron Latu had a drop that if he would have hit onto it, would have been a first down. Jermaine Burton had a drop or 2 out there. It's just, you're not seeing the number one guy emerge here for this offense. Now, I know JoJo Earl had a touchdown reception. That was big for him coming off the foot fracture he had in fall camp. But when you're so used to, in years past, having a Julio Jones, having an Amari Cooper, a Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Jameson Williams, having that go-to guy that this is the guy that's going to be dependable for us. This is going to be the guy that's going to demand attention from a corner and a safety, but still find a way to get his. And Alabama not having that guy right now consistently, it's an issue there because, Bryce Young wants that guy to emerge. The question is, Justin, who is that guy going to be that becomes that number one guy that Bryce can have that trust in?
I think that's the biggest question. I think this is the first time in a long time, like you said, Stephen, where they do not have a true number one wide receiver who we can point to, a guy who has consistently played well. I thought Ja'Cory Brooks could mature into that. I thought he was on track to possibly take that step coming off that Vanderbilt game, but then he came out against Arkansas and dropped several passes. Did he? I'm not sure if he left the game with a reception or not, but unfortunately, he was not able to play consistent in this matchup, and I think that is something across the board that Alabama is lacking in terms of the wide receiver position. Trayshawn Holden has been inconsistent. Jermaine Burton has been inconsistent. Kobe Prentice has looked really, really good at times, but he just basically falls away and falls to the wayside as the game goes on. So he has had his moments. Isaiah Bond is showing some flashes. I always think he sneaks into the game because a lot of time your mind is not on his name. He just all of a sudden is inside the game, and Alabama is targeting him down the field. Look as if going back to the last couple of games, even before that Arkansas matchup, going back to the Texas matchup, they seem to have some confidence in Bond getting behind opposing teams' defenses and letting him go down the field and hitting him down the field just based on his speed and length that he has. But you're right, Stephen, they don't have a number one guy. It will be interesting to see if anyone steps up. My prediction was Ja'Cory Brooks, but I'm not sure about that prediction anymore. So we'll keep our eyes on to see if anybody steps up. I think that is something that we have to look at moving forward.
Yeah, I think this is almost like a blessing and a curse for Alabama from the standpoint of, opposing teams scouting them. They have no idea who's going to go off from week to week. They don't know who's going to be the number one guy. But then on the flip side, neither does Alabama. Alabama doesn't know who their go-to guy really is because there's just no consistency right now. Kobe Prentice and Isaiah Bond showing flashes, but those are young guys to be depending on in some of these big games coming up. And it's just see Ja'Cory Brooks after the big week. This is kind of the story of his career so far. He's just not really consistent. And the same thing with Trayshawn Holden and even Cameron Latu. I think Cameron, if I'm not mistaken, the only target I can really remember is the one where he dropped. So they're not really necessarily getting him involved in the passing game all that much. And then, so I mean, maybe the most reliable, consistent guy is Jahmyr Gibbs because he's the one who really showed the most consistency out of the backfield, catching passes and just being that three-tool guy that Alabama has been looking for a long time. And I guess when I look at the wide receiver room as a whole, Alabama has been on such a run of dominance and developing and just acquiring the wide receivers. Just look at the players they put in the NFL the past couple of seasons. So for them to be struggling a little bit in terms of like developing a number one guy, I think this is just this is almost like the college football scale balancing themselves.
Good point there coming from you, Pat. Strong point right there. So we can now look at the defense, which was another group that also grew up in terms of facing adversity. You're up 28-0. Bryce Young goes down. You lost your leader, your captain, the Heisman Trophy winner. The game just kind of stops. It just kind of really stands still. And Arkansas, the crowd gets back into it. The Hogs get some momentum. They put up 23 unanswered points, but somehow this Alabama defense, they hold up. Brian Branch gets hurt, and that's a guy that's a pivotal part of a defensive secondary. But, you had, Chris Braswell to step up. Jalen Moody made some big plays. Jaheim Otis got his first sack. Deontay Lawson stepped up in there a little bit. There was good moments from just different guys. To me, this was probably Kool-Aid McKinstry's best game to this point. So a lot of guys defensively, though it was adversity, though it was tough, it was a hostile environment in Fayetteville, Pat, there were a lot of moments in this game where even Pete Gold and this defense, like I can mention, if not for the special teams blunder there, Arkansas doesn't get a touchdown down there in the red area. If not for penalties there, does Arkansas even get 26 points? I mean, it probably gets maybe 10, maybe 14, but 26. So some penalties played a role in there. Some unfortunate bounces played a role in there. But I thought, Pat, the defense in the face of adversity did some really good things.
No, I think there were a lot of really good things. And speaking to your point about Kool-Aid McKinstry, and I want to rope in Terron Arnold as well. And throughout the entire game, between the two of them, they were targeted 15 times throughout the game. They only allowed 5 receptions for 44 yards. So it might be safe to say that Alabama has its 2 starting corners in Terron Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry, because both those guys have really matured in those roles. And this was, like you said, this was Kool-Aid's best game of the season. And yeah, no, I agree with you, Stephen, too, on the standpoint of, they really spotted Arkansas more points than they really deserved throughout the game, in terms of just the onside kick, not being prepared for it. But after that onside kick, Alabama actually did a decent job of holding to a field goal. That drive went 12 plays for only 50 yards, which resulted in the 3 points. So all things considered, with Arkansas getting that momentum, it turned out okay. It just so happened that Alabama, the very next drive on offense, went 3 and out, and then had a terrible snap on the punt to then spotted them another 7 points. So, and then later on in the game, the obvious play, Alabama gets the stop, Henry To'oTo'o, the boneheaded play, shove him in the back, that leads to a field goal as well. So they spotted them 13 points. Arkansas really only should have scored 13 points, in my opinion, total. So I think there were a lot of good things from the Alabama defense, but like Nick Saban said, just maintaining that consistency throughout the game. And also they still do need to improve the run defense a little bit, I feel like, because Arkansas, there's going to be more teams like Arkansas whose strength is running the football, who they'll see down the stretch in the season, and they can't give up 87 yards on the ground. They need to shore that up a little bit. But as a whole, I thought the defense actually performed pretty well, also considering all the circumstances.
Yeah, I think the defense was pretty strong. I really like the fact that there were several guys out making plays. You talked about some of them, Pat. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terron Arnold. McKinstry doing a great job of meeting the wide receiver as soon as the football is about to make contact with their hands. Even that pass interference that he got called on didn't look like a pass interference. You saw guys like DJ Dale making plays, Jaheim Otis making plays up front, Deontay Lawson making a couple of plays as well. DeMarco Hellams coming downhill, I think, to force a fumble on the Arkansas. I think it was his running back. So when you take a look at Alabama's defense, I think they definitely showed a lot of promise. I think we're starting to see what the stats showed earlier in the season. Like Alabama, in terms of stats and on the paper, they have one of the top defenses in the country. And I think on Saturday we kind of saw it with our eyes more so than it being on paper. So I think Alabama's defense is headed in the right direction. Definitely feel they have found their starting cornerbacks and the guys we expected to be the 2 guys in Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terron Arnold. Going back to that mistake on the punt, I think that was really interesting. A horrible snap. I'm not sure where the long snapper was aiming the football on that particular play, but do you guys think James Burnham did the right thing by falling on it? Or do you feel he should have made an effort to try to punt it? Or from my first initial thought, I thought he should have probably made an effort to punt it, but it probably would have been blocked because the Arkansas guy was like real close to him. So I thought it was a really interesting play.
I think you're always taught as a punter just to fall on the football, because where the ball went to the 3-yard line. If he picked it up and tried to punt it and there's guys closing in, if it was blocked, then that's a touchdown. And it ended up being a touchdown anyways, but you always want to kind of give your defense a little bit of a chance to make that stop. So I think probably James probably did the smart thing. I know hindsight's 2020, but at that, in that situation, you kind of just got to fall on it, in my opinion.
I think Burnham did the right thing there. I thought it was like miscommunication between Neil and Hibbett, the long snapper, and Henry To'oTo'o, because the ball just hit Henry T. It deflected off of him. I don't know if it was miscommunication or what the case was, but I think Hibbett, I don't know if he was expecting Burnham to be rolling to the other side or what the case was, but when he snapped it, it went to the left instead of where Burnham wanted it, to the right. It was just weird.
Well, on the replay, I think Burnham lines up in an end, because they do some weird stuff on the special teams in terms of their punting, because they kind of do that kind of rollout punt. I'm not really sure all the special teams techniques and whatnot or what the terminology is, but Burnham lines up at a certain angle, so he's not lined up directly with the long snapper. I don't know if that was an error on that play, but I don't even think that on the replay, I don't even think the ball hit Henry To'oTo'o. It was just so wide to the other side that I think that whether it just slipped or what, it was just a crazy hectic play.
It was, but I mean, like you guys mentioned, I mean, Burnham, all you can do is just fall on that. You can't try to pick that up because, I mean, worst could come to worst. It could have been a touchdown for Arkansas. So, you slide on the ball, you protect the ball there, and that's exactly what Burnham did. But I even look at going into, going back to just, as you mentioned, Pat, at the play that Henry T made, To'oTo'o, where he just, hit the guy in the back there, the 10 penalties. Coach Saban will have that cleaned up. The run defense got to get cleaned up. Raheem Sanders had 101 yards rushing, had over 7 yards per carry. And when you're facing a guy like Devon A-Chain this upcoming week for A&M, A-Chain's going to run wild. You got, Tank Bigsby of Auburn down the road. He's going to want to run wild. You got other backs that you're going to face down the road. They're going to want to run wild. Apparently, Mississippi State's gotten really good. Took care of Texas A&M. You got to face them. Lane Kiffin's not necessarily happy with the crowd at the Grove at Ole Miss, but you still got to face Lane Kiffin. So, I mean, got to clean up the run defense there, but there were some areas, there were some things where we did see Alabama make improvement there offensively and defensively. But before we prepare to wrap this thing up here, Pat, tell us about our great people over there at Prize Picks and what they got going on.
Yeah, so at Prize Picks, all first-time users that deposit and use our promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. Prize Picks is the best way to have action on the game in states like California, Florida, Texas, Georgia, and over 70% of the United States. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So how does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. At Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. Prize Picks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Download Prize Picks today and play daily fantasy sports with us. Make sure to use our promo code BAMA100. Again, that's BAMA100 when you sign up. And I had some bad luck on our Prize Picks projections this week because it was Bryce Young heavy, and he left the game way before he could hit any of his projections. So it was a tough week for the podcast, but hopefully Bryce Young comes back. We'll have a little bit of a bounce back week this upcoming weekend.
Unfortunately, P, we could not control that, buddy. We just cannot control that. But like you mentioned, hopefully this upcoming week will be a better week. And speaking of this upcoming week, you got Texas A&M this week in Tuscaloosa. CBS has done everybody a favor. They made this a night game in prime time, 7 p.m. Central Time. Kickoff here from Bryant-Denny. You got Nick Saban. You got Jimbo Fisher. Nothing else needs to be said. There'll be a lot of talking this week and player interviews. And Coach Saban will make his press conference on Monday to give off his first thoughts. We'll see what Jimbo Fisher and the players for the Aggies have to say. And after last year, the 41-38 win for A&M at Kyle Field, and during the spring, the recruiting dust-up that happened between Coach Saban and Jimbo Fisher. Just so much that will be brought here to the table. Going to be a good game on Saturday. Pat, you and I will be there taking on all of those festivities. So going to be outstanding. We'll dive more so into this on Thursday. But as our final thoughts here for the recap here, Pat, I mean, what were you most impressed with at the conclusion of the Arkansas game?
Well, definitely the offensive line, the run game, because that's the area I've been talking about to death since week one. They had to figure out the offensive line, had to get the run game going, and they answered the bell this week in a hostile environment against Arkansas, and it was a real weapon. And Jahmyr Gibbs was unlocked, and just showed his special ability. So definitely the run game and the pass protection from the offensive line was what impressed me the most this week.
Yeah, for me, Steven, I think the thing that comes to my mind is the thing that you brought up, the question about who will be Alabama's number one wide receiver moving forward. Because I think a couple weeks ago we were talking about Alabama will have a couple of weeks here to figure some things out. They don't have weeks anymore. These guys are going to have to grow up against SEC competition. So I'm going to keep my eyes on. I'm just really interested in seeing how things shake out in terms of the wide receiver group. We do know that they will return some guys from injury, even more guys. Joe will get more snaps in the future because he will continue to get more healthy. But looking at guys like Tyler Harrell, Aaron Anderson is a guy who could possibly make an impact. But he is a freshman and he is coming off an injury. So I am knowledgeable of that. I'm not sure how much he will be working to Alabama's offense, but I am really interested in seeing if Alabama can figure out things as in terms of getting a number one wide receiver. So I think my biggest takeaway is what you said, Stephen. I don't think they have a number one wide receiver at the moment.
I think my biggest takeaway, guys, was the performance of Jalen Milroe. Going out there in a hostile environment, the starting quarterback goes out, your number's called, he goes out there. Yes, it wasn't pretty. Yes, there's still some things he needs to do in the passing game. Of course, he knows that. But the way he was able to be poised, to steady the ship, to keep things in motion, and he leaves the game 65 passing yards, 91 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, big 77-yard run to give Alabama back the momentum when it felt like Arkansas had grabbed it all to their side. So I left the game going, hey, there's promise here with Milroe. There's promise. If he can get the passing game tweaked a little bit more, watch out, because you see the feet, you see the legs, you see the strength, you see the athleticism. If he can get the passing game tweaked a bit more, he doesn't have to be an elite passer. If he can be good enough throwing that ball to make you account for that, if he can be good enough distributing the football to make you account for that, he is going to be something nice to watch here in the future for Alabama football. But, folks, that's going to do it here on a Sunday. The recap of Alabama-Arkansas, Touchdown Alabama Magazine, the BAMA Elite, just giving you our thoughts of what we saw and how Alabama grew up in a hostile environment against the Hogs. Until Thursday, folks, this is the BAMA Elite. See you next time.